All right. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to give you a scenario that I want you guys to picture. Okay, and I really want you to picture this. This is about a family who's been affected by domestic violence. Okay, close your eyes if you want to, and just connect. You have this violent father who comes home from work. He is angry. He is working daily just to pay the bills. He comes home frustrated and takes it out on the kids and the wife. He's breaking their spirits daily. He is absent. He disrupts the entire home. You have the demanding in-laws in the background, chattering away. Then you have an enabling mother, the wife. Due to the violence, loss of independence, family demands, because she didn't get the validation she needed from her husband and her own family, she's disconnected from her inner self. Basically, she doesn't even know how to feel anymore. Out of guilt, she starts enabling the children. What does enabling mean? Allowing things you normally wouldn't allow and you know are unhealthy. The mother comes to a point where she doesn't even know what's right from wrong, as I said. Now let's look at the children in this family, the offsprings of this family. Again, please try to connect. This can be your own mother. It could be your own family or a family that you know. Now you have a brother, probably because of the same anger issues, as the father starts emulating the father. The mom feels guilty and starts giving him money. He also starts disrupting the family. The other brother starts using drugs due to all the chaos and hypocrisy in the family. He uses his sexuality and drugs to drown his sorrows. You have a sister totally ignored in the background. Remember, the father is always working, right? The mother is busy doing, taking care of the in-laws, taking care of the home. So there's this young girl in the background. So what she does is she goes outside, dresses provocatively to get attention, negative male attention. So she feels validated. To sum it up, you have an entire family unit that is underdeveloped, that cannot function in society. Do any of you know a family like this? Can you raise your hand if any of you know a family like this that might have been affected by certain things like this? Okay. So when you think of abuse, right? When you think of abuse, what comes to your mind? When you think of domestic violence, what comes to your mind?
You usually think about the physical aspects.
Physical. Okay. Anything else? Hitting, right? Anything else? Okay, great. So yeah, domestic violence comes in all forms. And this is what I'm going to try to point out today. It comes in many forms. And today I'm going to talk about the different forms of abuse, the statistics in South Asian families, the inch-by-inch process, right? And why is it so difficult for South Asians, individuals from from that background to get help, and some protective factors and help for the abuser. Because we always talk about how to get help for the person who's being abused. But what about the abuser? How do we help that person as well, right? So number one, some of the statistics. And I'm sure, what's her name?
It's Maggie.
Okay, Maggie. Okay, Dr. Abraham. Okay, so I'm sure she has all the ins and outs of all the statistics because she's actually creating them herself and doing the research, right? But I do want some research that I looked up on the national statistics in 2018. Approximately 5 million children are exposed to domestic violence every year. Children exposed are more likely to attempt suicide, abuse drugs and alcohol, run away from home, engage in teenage prostitution, and commit sexual assault crimes. That's intense, right? That's one of the statistics. Another one. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. Right? Now let's look at some statistics from South Asian communities. Globally, 10% to 69% of women are reported experiencing physical violence by an intimate partner globally, right? However, the highest prevalence rates among women occurred in Southeast Asia. Okay, according to this study. that was recorded in the World Health Organization. According to the 2017 fact sheet by the Asian Pacific Institute on gender-based violence, a study was conducted among Indian and Pakistani abused women in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the study results found that 96% of Indian and Pakistani victims reported having experienced physical violence by an intimate partner. 96%, right? So now I want to talk about, so number one, awareness is key, right? We have to make our communities aware of what's going on, right? And not just that, how to get help. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what are the different types of abuse. Okay, like you said, we always think about it's physical abuse, but it's not just physical abuse, right? Physical abuse, yeah, it's someone hitting you, right? Your partner hitting you, right? Not just your partner, right? It could be your in-laws, right? It could be your in-laws. It's not just, again, we don't want to just say it's one particular person, right? It's domestic, right? It could be it can be the entire family. Right? So just being very, very careful about that. Also, there's emotional abuse. So what does emotional abuse look like? Put downs, right? Criticisms, constant criticism, threatening. I'll go find attention somewhere else. You'll see what happens, right? Comments like that. There's verbal abuse. So verbal abuse looks like this. Cursing. You make me miserable. You are the cause of my misery. Right? So blaming you constantly, right? Then so remember, words can hurt more than physical pain sometimes, right? So being aware of the verbal abuse aspect of it. Then there's economic abuse, which Dr. Abrams talked about, right? Where controlling with money, with finances. Then there's spiritual abuse, when you twist certain aspects of the religion and to support abuse. Right? So that's that abuse. So being aware of that. Moving on. And then there's also avoidant abuse. This is when, and this is a lot of people don't know about this one. This one is avoidant abuse is when your partner withholds affection and love to punish you. Right? So this is something, no, you don't even know it's happening. You're like, wait a second, why do I feel so rejected? Why do I feel like something wrong with me? Am I not pretty enough? Right? So when you start questioning yourself, right? And you notice a pattern where your spouse, your partner, is withholding that from you. Okay? So being aware of that. And a lot of our communities don't know about these little different aspects because we think of domestic violence and all we think is hitting. But it's much more than that. It's much more than that. Right? So, and then you want to also remember that it doesn't happen, sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. It's an inch by inch process. So being aware of that inch by inch process. Right? So what do I mean by that? In the beginning, it might just start out with blaming you for certain things, right? The control might begin slowly, right? Intimidation, bringing up things from 5 years ago, right? To excuse certain behaviors, blaming you again. There can be, poor me, and just like my life. Then there's my childhood. So blaming, his or her behavior on their childhood, right? The childhood, cursing, throwing things, breaking things. And so it might just start out, like I said, originally with just emotional abuse, then going on to verbal abuse, and then moving on to avoidant abuse, and then moving on to physical abuse. Or it might not even follow any pattern, but being aware of that inch by inch process, because it happens, because like I said, I have a lot of clients that I work with, a lot of families. And when these women come to me, it's not like, they're women who have been born here, educated with a master's degree, now have 4 kids, no job, and they're stuck. And they're like, wait a second, I don't even have a car. I don't know how to leave with my 4 kids right now. And it's a sad reality, but it's true. Because it happens so slowly, right? In certain circumstances, it happens very slowly. It's an inch by inch process, so being aware of that. And you beautiful women and everybody here, you want to make sure you're aware of it, because it can happen to anyone. Or it can happen to the most educated person. Okay? So now I'm going to talk about why don't they get help? Why don't individuals get help? Okay? It's particularly in South Asian communities. because that's the topic, right? Okay. So family honor, right? Family honor. Getting help leads to the devaluation of of family status, which we kind of touched upon before. Family honor is prioritized over the daughter or son's mental and physical well-being, unfortunately. There is cultural programming, okay? As we mentioned again, culture is beautiful, but right? Culture is a beautiful thing. But there's certain aspects, right, that can lead to, like, there's that stigma of divorce, right? So there's certain aspects like shame, the shame-based culture. Certain cultures have a lot of guilt-based culture, tragedy-based, right? So you're like, wait a second, what will happen to you? How will you live alone? How are you going to take care of your daughter? How are you going to take care of your 2-week-old? So a lot of that fear, right, that's instilled in you. So being aware of, like, wait a second, am I doing this? Am I not getting help because my family will be shamed, right? Or that guilt. Wait a second. What will, I'm gonna embarrass my family. I'm gonna embarrass my family if I get help, right? In the expense of your own physical and mental health, right? So being aware of certain cultural programming that might have occurred. Lack of knowledge, right, between religion versus culture. So sometimes cultural expectations that are contradictory to religion. Because again, like a lot of you know this as well, where, let me give you some certain examples. The culture says women have to work like slaves, so, right? Certain cultures might depict that. But the religion says the husband is actually gets rewarded for helping his wife with household chores. You've heard of that, right? Okay. Another one. Culture says withholding love, cursing her, closing her credit cards due to not obeying the in-laws is a form of punishment. Right? Not all. I'm saying again, like I said, versus religion, that says you get rewarded for treating your wife with respect, love, and patience. So getting that knowledge, knowing the difference between what the religion really says and what the culture says, right? Certain aspects of the culture says. Family upbringing, that's a big one. Cycle of violence is repeated, right? So remember that family that I depicted earlier? And when they first started out. Here, for example, particularly girls from certain homogenous cultures are programmed not to feel, okay? And I'm not saying this happens purposefully. It just happens because that's just the way they were brought up. This is what they saw. Angry father, busy mother, right, at home. As children, they were never validated, right? Why? Because the father was busy working, right? And the mother was busy taking care of the family in the expense of her needs, right? And I'm sure a lot of you know some aunts, some even your own mothers who've experienced this, okay? And what ends up happening is, due to the chaos, right? Due to the chaos, the daughter's in the background being ignored, as I explained. They only learn to exist for other people, right? Seek validation of self through pleasing parents constantly. Doing for the family, then their spouse, and then their in-laws. So this is how they feel like they should get their validation, right? Then you have the sons, right, of these families. Because again, we're talking about family upbringing. Here they learned how to be angry, emulating the dad. No one taught them processing skills, right? No one taught them processing skills. So they never learned how to appropriately express themselves. And they start behaving negatively to get negative attention, right? So negative reinforcement starts. And the cycle of negative reinforcement begins, like I said. The enabling begins by the mother, and this cycle is just continued and continued. And this is passed down to the next generation. Do you see how this works? Okay. Now, and sometimes these individuals don't even know that they're being abused or abusing someone, because they might not even be aware of it, because it's just ingrained in them now. It becomes a habit where they're not even familiar with that yet. Yes, you have a question? No problem. Okay.
It was like reading a seer, and I could totally relate to it because, like, I understand. Like, Islam is like honestly something that's like mixed a lot with culture, and like even in mosques when you hear like Huzur speaking, it's just all culture. Because I'm like, this cannot be God. This cannot be a merciful and all-loving God.
Mm-hmm.
Like a person who just jails you in a religion.
Sure.
You're supposed to have an open mind. You're supposed to listen to other people.
Exactly, of course.
You're supposed to let other people listen to you.
Sure.
You're supposed to give love to other people and
Yes.
have that back.
Yes, absolutely. So I talk about a lot of these things. A lot of these topics that you're talking about is on my YouTube channel. Please go on and just type in Dr. Farjana Khan, and all these topics that no one talks about, I talk about.
Yeah.
Okay? So thank you for coming. Okay? Pleasure. Okay? So now I'm going to talk about just the protective factors for the abusee. And I'm going to go fast because I do want you to get the benefits of it. Okay? So empower yourself. Okay, so the person who's being abused, empower yourself, or preventive measures, right? So as women, right, you want to know what can you do to prevent this or become aware of it, right? Because awareness is always key. First step is always awareness. That's how you can even know something is wrong, right? Where the dysfunction exists. So empower yourself. So what do I mean by that? Spiritually, physically, emotionally. With your thoughts, empower yourself. Educate yourself on what a negative and positive relationship looks like. Right? Sometimes we don't even know because we've never seen it really, right? Also, get out of your head. Stop overthinking things. Just sometimes we're just in our thoughts, in our negative patterns of thinking. So being aware of that, right? Trust in life. Make sure as women, especially women, your money is in order, right? Learn how to drive, right? Make sure your education is in order, okay? Have a plan of action if, God forbid, anything were to happen. Also, make sure your house is in order. Make sure everything is organized, right? Stand up for yourself. Correct wrong behavior. Your children are watching. So if you don't have children yet, trust me, your children will be watching you, okay? You are their role models. Also, is your house a den of misery or a happy, inviting home? So what do I mean by that? Remember, I talked about certain communities. It's like sometimes it's tragedy based. Even in the movies, you'll watch some Bollywood movies and Indian movies, and it's like so much tragedy, right? And you want to be aware. It's like, wait a second, is this a positive home or is this a den of misery? Like, oh my goodness. So is there this concept of learned helplessness that's like, okay, it's always going to be like hopeless, So being aware of that idea. Also build a support system. As Dr. Abram again talked about, building your support system with your friends, right? With an adult that you trust, some professors that you trust, having that support system even after you graduate, because you are going to get married and you're going to move on, and just having those support systems in place and not losing those support systems. Actively build your confidence. What do I mean by that? Nowadays, right? Confidence can't just come and, we get an award. We're like, oh, yeah, we're smart, or, we're, whatever, whatnot. You have to actively build your confidence. So what do I mean by that? Have exercise, right? Positive affirmations, a success list. Maybe you want to create a list where you're writing all your successes. So when you do have bad times, when you are having difficult times, you can refer back to that list. That can help you. Right? So nowadays you have to actively build your confidence, because like I said, now we're flooded with negativity in media, right? Our confidence it relies on how many likes we have on Instagram and Facebook, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that's for everyone, but for a lot of our youth. So we have to actively build that confidence, okay? Learn how to process your emotions. Right? So what will you do in those moments of stress, right? Or difficulties, or you have these issues with your partner? What are you going to do? So having a processing list, right? Also accept what is going on, like process those emotions and get the help. So you have to look at the situation and assess it and say, wait a second, I think am I in a domestic violence? Am I in this situation right now? Is there some type of abuse? Wait a second, I think this is verbal abuse. Wait a second, I think this is avoidance abuse. And then accepting it, processing those emotions that come with it. Otherwise, you'll just become numb, right? If you're just going to let it happen over and over and over, you're just going to become numb, develop depression. So you want to become aware of it and then get the help, right? And don't deny it either. It's happening. If it's happening, you have to get that help, right? Also, realize that your physical and mental health come first. So taking care of yourself. So the more you take care of yourself, getting enough sleep, your vitamins, your water, what ends up happening is then you can detect dysfunction. If you are physically and mentally taking care of yourself, it's easier for you to see the dysfunction because you have those boundaries very clear. Like, wait a second. And then you'll be able to not just let the emotions take over. Okay? Log behavior. This is very important. And if, please share this with your clubs or whatever, whatnot. Log the behavior. This is an important technique. A lot of us don't use this. So if you are in a relationship, right, and with a spouse, partner, and you start noticing a pattern in them, but then you're like, no, and you start making excuses, right? Log it. Write the date, write the time, and what the person did. And then log it again, and log it again. And guess what? You'll be like, wait a second. This is an abusive relationship. Or there's some dysfunction in this relationship. We need to get help. I need to get help. He needs to get help. We both need to get help together. So when you log behavior, you're not making excuses because life is busy, right? Life is very busy. So you want to go and make sure you'll get busy with work, papers, job, responsibilities, children. But when you're logging that behavior, you'll see it on your phone in the notes section or wherever you want to put it. You'll say, wait a second. Please, this is very crucial. If this is a technique that you can tell anyone, just, hey, if you hear they start complaining, your friend maybe, or some members in the community, oh, you know what, this is happening, I'm not sure, or they're not talking, or you notice certain signs, symptoms, some signs, you just say, you know what, start logging the behavior. It'll help you. It'll help you stay objective, right? Not subjective, right? Okay. So that's logging behavior. Also, play the movie. Play the movie. So if this dysfunction continues, what effect will it have on my children 2 years from now? What effect will it have on me 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? All right? So a lot of, again, throughout my work with a lot of families, I noticed that women come to me and they'll say, I feel like a zinda lash. If you know what that means, it means like a dead inside, right? Like your soul is dead. And they walk that way, they talk that way. Why? Because the constant criticism, the outbursts, the banging, the breaking things, right? The put downs. So how long are you willing to put up with that, right? And what do you think the effects are going to have? What effects will it have on your children? And then some women will say, no, I'm confident. I can use my positive affirmations and work through this. But how long, right? So there's a difference between wishful thinking and hopeful thinking. And this is another important technique that you can share with your colleagues, your friends, right? If you're in a relationship, you can wish that your husband gets better or your spouse gets better, partner, great? But that's wishing. And there's a difference between hoping. Hoping is they're actually going to therapy with you. They're getting help. They're going to anger management classes. They're trying to figure out. So that's called hopeful, where there's actual actions being taken to get help, versus wishful, where, I wish my husband changes, right? Or I wish my spouse changes. So playing the movie 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what your life would look like staying with this person, and then realizing, is this wishful thinking or is this hopeful thinking? Very important. Moving on. Don't make decisions based on shame, as I mentioned, guilt, cultural programming, and family upbringing, right? Don't make decisions on those aspects. As a couple, ask yourself, are we reenacting our family dysfunction in some way? Another thing a lot of couples do, if they are not aware or they didn't do a lot of processing work, they will emulate or reenact what they went through as children. So they'll get married to, let's just take two unaware individuals, right? They think they did a lot of work, they got themselves back, they did therapy work or whatnot. But they get married, and they're newly married, right? And then she starts acting like her parents, he starts acting like his parents. And there's a dysfunction, right? So asking yourself those questions like, wait a second, as a couple, are we, wait, and making those connections and not repeating those patterns of dysfunction. Also, reading self-help books, right? Again, when I first started, we talked about empowering yourselves, right? So how? One way is to get your favorite self-help book that's going to empower, that you read periodically, that you love, and you read it. So you need to do that processing work. Don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid. Stand up, right? Stand up. Don't be afraid. So have your support system in place and don't be afraid. Use visualization techniques, right? So take the control back. So let's say if this person, again, it depends on the level of abuse. But if it's not immediate danger, obviously, right? And this is just, let's say, you're confident enough and there's verbal abuse going on, right? Or some emotional abuse, but you're confident enough, you literally can use some visualization techniques to reduce the intimidation, right? And correct that person. And I can share a lot of these techniques. If you talk to me privately or contact me, I can talk about these techniques, okay? Remember, people will continue to do what you allow them to do, right? We know this. And you want to make sure that you don't confuse their pathology with yours, right? Don't confuse, their behavior is not your behavior. And sometimes when we're in these types of relationships, we think, wait a second, am I also, and then you just get tied up in it. And you have to just separate yourself. This is you and this is me. This is you and this is me, right? Also, reminding yourself that your children are always watching. If you don't have children yet, just remember your children are always watching. They're learning, right? So you need to stop. Your children's character is being shaped. So you need to stop the dysfunction. If you do want, let's say there are certain aspects of your marriage or your relationship that has some abusive tendencies in there, you need to take a pause and talk about it, bring it to each other's awareness, and seek professional help, right? Again, depending on the level of danger, right? Now, if, let's say, there is immediate danger, you call 911, right? You do what you need to take care of yourself. But let's say you're in a situation and you're not ready to leave yet. And there are certain women that aren't ready to leave yet, right? Or vice versa. I just don't want to say women. It can be men too, right? Have a plan of action. Like I said, you have to have a plan of action. What is that plan? And be very detailed at, right? Finances, whatever it is, that if this goes to a certain level, this is what I'm going to do, right? Okay. Are you guys with me so far? Yeah. Is this beneficial? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. All right, I'm very grateful. Okay, so we have to stop the cycle of violence, right? We have to stop the cycle of violence. And especially, women, if this is happening to you, it starts with you, right? You are the woman of the house. You need to take the control back. You need to take the control back. Help for the abuser. Let's talk about that. We rarely talk about that, right? So as far as the abuser asking themselves, do I really have a problem? How am I hurting my partner? If I'm putting my spouse down, criticizing her, belittling her, withholding love and affection, right? Am I doing all this to her? If I am doing that, then maybe I am abusing her. So remember I had mentioned earlier, because of their own abuse, because of their own family upbringing, right? Some cultural influences. They might not even know that they're actually engaging in this type of behavior, right? I'm not making excuses for them, but I'm just making it aware. I'm making you all aware that that can also be a possibility, right? So then another thing they can ask themselves is, the abuser, do I want to save my family and get better? What's my plan of action? So again, difference between wishful and hopeful. Let's get real help, right? Next. Where's my anger coming from, right? You want to remember that anger is a symptom, right? Anger is a symptom. So it comes from pain. So getting help for that pain, right? Seeking help, understanding it, processing it. Where is it really coming from? What's the root cause? What is the root cause? Better stress management, right? That helps all of us. learning to watch yourself. Like, this is, again, a technique that I came up with for my 5th book. It's called the Watch Yourself Technique. And here I teach people that there's another you always watching you. There's another you always watching you. Awareness, right? And you're watching yourself, how you're engaging in your daily life. What are you doing in the kitchen when you're cooking? Are you smiling? Do you have a mean face? Always being in that state of awareness, right? Reflecting, self-reflecting, processing. And so, as the abuser, what patterns of abuse am I repeating from my own childhood, right? So teaching this person to become aware of themselves and their reactions, right? So they're not so reactive. Like, wait a second, and pointing it out like, oh, I think you're doing what your mom used to do. Remember how she used to yell at you like that, right? So kind of like, again, like bringing it into awareness. The next, how has my culture played a role? What does my religion really say about this? What does it really say? So getting that knowledge between real Islam versus cultural Islam, right? And, or whatever religion, right? And you want to remember that awareness is one of the highest powers you can have, right? So it always starts with awareness. So I hope these skills have helped you, these techniques, right? And shed some light on what abuse can be, the different realms of it, different forms of it, right? How the abused person can get help and how the abuser can get help, right? So hopefully this was helpful. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.